Hey guys, tonight we begin with a sweep of white, a silence so deep, it almost feels like time stops. Dim your lights, get cozy, maybe grab a blanket. Let's drift over to the edge of the world, Antarctica. The thing about Antarctica is we see only the surface, a vast frozen desert, but beneath that ice, there might lie echoes of Earth's hidden past. Maybe nothing spectacular, maybe something strange. We'll meander through those possibilities, gently. Now, before we go deep, a little grounding note. Antarctica is real. I mean, we've sent scientists, explorers, bases, satellites. This isn't pure fantasy, but some stories push at the edges between fact and speculation. And tonight, I want you to float with me there. The cold giant. Antarctica covers about 14 million square kilometers. That's huge, more than Europe on its own. It's nearly 10% of Earth's land area, blanketed in ice. That is, in many spots, miles thick. Temperatures plunge. At some points, the cold is so severe that human life as we know it can't persist for long. The wind, the isolation, the remoteness. Antarctica is not hospitable, but humans have tried anyway. Let's think back to early explorers. Imagine sailing south, ice choking your hull, months of darkness, storms raging. People like Roald Amundsen, Robert Falcon Scott, hardships, loss, suffering. They went because part curiosity, part ambition. They mapped the edges, they planted flags, they died. Because, of course, exploring that place is brutal. But those explorers only scratched the surface, literally and metaphorically. They couldn't see what lies under 2 kilometers of ice in places. They couldn't know what deep cores would reveal about ancient climates, or what hidden mountains or valleys might exist, hidden from our eyes. Ice cores and frozen memory. One of the more fascinating things scientists have done is drill ice cores. You take a long cylinder out of the ice. Each layer is like a page in Earth's diary. Trapped bubbles, dust, chemicals, even bits of old air. From that, we learn about Earth's past climate, which atmospheres were richer in how cold or warm things were when ice ages intensified or receded. Through ice cores, Antarctica whispers to us about epochs we cannot visit. Millennia, tens of millennia. You start seeing patterns, cycles, extremes, shifts that helps understand not just Antarctica, but global climate. Now, here's where things get darker or weirder, gently. There are unexplained anomalies, layers with unexpected chemical signatures, unusual isotopes, puzzles in the data that don't always fit clean models. Are they mistakes, noise, or hints at something more complex in Earth's history? Let's float over to another thread, subglacial lakes. Lakes hidden beneath miles of ice. You might imagine Antarctica is just ice atop rock, but no, there are lakes. Liquid water, warmed by geothermal heat, pressure, or insulation by ice. One famous one is Lake Vostok. It's under more than 3,700 meters of ice, completely cut off from sunlight for perhaps millions of years. What could live there? Microbes, life, very unlike what we know. Organisms adapted to crushing pressure, darkness, extreme cold. The idea is almost romantic, life persisting in isolation, in a place we can barely reach. Of course, it's not big, dramatic animals, microbes, maybe odd bacteria. But still, life in isolation. That's compelling. Researchers try to drill down, but contamination is a huge risk. You don't want to drop modern microbes into ancient lakes and mess up whatever's there. So they proceed with caution, sterile equipment, complex methods, and if there were ruins or signs of ancient civilizations, well, caution is even more urgent, because the deeper you dig, the more you risk damaging the very thing you want to discover. So, picture this. It's the early 1900s. The world is full of unexplored corners, and rich people are funding expeditions mostly to have their names on a mountain or a map. The heroic age of Antarctic exploration, they called it, which is a very dramatic title for something that mostly involved frostbite and dying intense. You had men like Ernest Shackleton, the eternal optimist. He launched the Endurance expedition in 1914 and promptly got trapped in the ice. For months, his ship was crushed, his crew stranded, and yet, somehow, he managed to keep morale high. He even gave inspirational talks while penguins waddled by, probably judging them for their life choices. The irony, Shackleton never reached the South Pole, but he became more famous for not dying than most people did for reaching it. His story is a mix of disaster, leadership, and British stubbornness. A kind of "we started this, so we might as well finish freezing." Then there's Robert Falcon Scott, who actually made it to the pole, only to discover that Roald Amundsen had beaten him there by 5 weeks. Imagine trekking across a continent of ice, only to find someone else's flag already planted. Scott and his team died on the way back. His last diary entry said, "We shall stick it out to the end." He did. Sadly, so did the cold. The empty continent. By the mid-20th century, Antarctica had become less about adventure and more about politics and science, which is often just adventure with paperwork. During the Cold War, both the US and the Soviet Union built research bases there. Because of course they did. If there's a remote patch of land, humans will eventually decide to put a flag and a generator on it. That's when whispers started. Rumors about secret operations, hidden tunnels, or ancient structures under the ice. Some of it tied back to Operation Hijump, a massive 1946 US Navy mission led by Admiral Richard Byrd. Officially, it was a training and research expedition. Unofficially, conspiracy circles later rebranded it as a top-secret hunt for something mysterious in Antarctica. Aliens, Nazi bases, lost civilizations, take your pick. In reality, it was probably just Cold War logistics and scientific surveying. But Operation Hijump does sound like the name of a bad spy movie, so people couldn't resist adding drama. Byrd himself was fascinating. A soft-spoken man who claimed to have flown over both poles, and sometimes talked about things he saw there that didn't belong. He mentioned green lands beyond the ice. To some, it was poetic description. To others, proof of hidden continents or hollow earth theories. Because when a famous explorer says something vague, the internet and even the 1950s press will fill in the blanks. Beneath the ice. Satellite mapping in recent decades showed that Antarctica isn't just a featureless ice sheet. Beneath it lie mountain ranges, valleys, and even signs of old river systems. Some call them ghost rivers, paths, carved long before the ice settled in. There's one especially mysterious area, Queen Maud Land, remote, ridged, oddly geometric in satellite imagery. Some people online have pointed at the shapes and said, "Those look like pyramids." Scientists, of course, said, "Those are mountains." And that's where the conversation stopped, or didn't, depending on which YouTube rabbit hole you fall into at 2 a.m. Could they be ancient structures? Realistically, probably not. But humans love symmetry, and our brains see patterns in almost anything. Clouds, toast, Antarctica. Still, it's an interesting thought experiment. If there were an ancient civilization before the last ice age, and if their remnants got buried under thousands of years of snow and compression, we'd probably never know, unless some piece of it poked through, or a radar image gave away a shape too sharp to be natural. The frozen past Antarctica holds something more important than lost temples, though. Time. In its ice are records of Earth's deep history, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, maybe even DNA fragments frozen before humans walked upright. Some of that data goes back 800,000 years. When scientists drill, they're not just chasing curiosity, they're literally unlocking climate time capsules. Every bubble of trapped gas, every particle of dust tells a tiny story, maybe of a forest fire in Africa, a volcano in Asia, or an ocean current that changed direction centuries ago. And buried under all that data might be the remnants of older ecosystems. Antarctica wasn't always frozen. Millions of years ago, it was warm and green, full of trees, rivers, and life. Fossilized leaves have been found, even dinosaur bones. So yes, once upon a time, Antarctica wasn't a barren white desert. It was a lush world that slowly fell asleep under the snow. Imagine that, a continent literally drifting into hibernation. By the time the Cold War hit its chilly peak, Antarctica had quietly become the world's strangest diplomatic experiment. An entire continent larger than Europe just sitting there, unclaimed, unpopulated, and too cold to fight over. So in 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, agreeing to use the land only for peaceful, scientific purposes, which sounds noble, and also suspiciously like the setup to a movie where everyone ignores the rules 10 minutes later. Officially, the treaty banned military activity, weapons testing, and nuclear explosions. Unofficially, it also fed the conspiracy crowd for decades, because if governments agree not to go somewhere, people immediately assume they already went and found something. And that's where the real myths start to snowball, literally and figuratively. The Frozen Reich. Let's ease into one of the internet's favorite bedtime ghost stories, Nazi Antarctica. Yes, according to rumor, somewhere under the southern ice lies a secret German base built in the 1940s. The story goes that a small Nazi expedition, led by a man named Alfred Richer, sailed there in 1938 to claim land for the Reich. They dropped flags, took aerial photos, and maybe, depending on which version you read, built bunkers under the ice to stash advanced technology, flying saucers, or even Hitler's ghost. The reality: they mostly took whale measurements. Seriously, the expedition's actual purpose was to secure whaling rights for oil production. But secret Nazi whale study doesn't sound nearly as exciting, so the story evolved into something more cinematic. Later, when American forces launched Operation Highjump in 1946, conspiracy writers decided it was a covert mission to root out this hidden base. In truth, it was just logistical training for polar operations. But that didn't stop the legend from growing frostier with each retelling. Because if you squint hard enough at an icy mountain, you can convince yourself you see a hangar door. The signals in the ice jump forward to modern times, and Antarctica hasn't lost its mystery, it's just gone digital. In 2006, scientists detected strange neutrino signals coming from under the ice. Neutrinos are tiny particles that rarely interact with matter, so when detectors pick them up from unusual angles, people get curious. Researchers at the ANITA project, the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, found signals that seemed to be traveling upward through Earth. Not impossible, but weird. Cue the internet theories. Secret base power source, alien communications, or my personal favorite, Antarctica is where the simulation's hard drive is stored. The scientific explanation is probably less romantic, some kind of particle interaction we don't fully understand yet. But it's human nature to reach for wonder before math, because cosmic rays scattering through glacial ice don't sound half as interesting as something is trying to talk to us from beneath the pole. The forbidden map. Then there's the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. It supposedly shows parts of the Antarctic coastline without ice, which shouldn't be possible, since the continent wasn't officially discovered until 1820. Historians think the map is actually a mashup of older charts, some based on South America's coast, but the resemblance is uncanny enough to fuel centuries of speculation. Some say it proves that ancient seafarers knew the southern lands long before Columbus or Magellan. Others say it's just bad cartography and overconfidence. And honestly, both explanations fit perfectly with how humans operate. Still, the idea lingers. What if ancient civilizations did map Antarctica when it was warm and green? What if those civilizations vanished when the ice came? A romantic thought, probably wrong, but comforting in the same way fairy tales are. The endless white. The deeper you look into Antarctica, the more it starts to feel less like a place and more like a mirror. People project their fears, hopes, and wildest theories onto it, because it's one of the last places we can easily see. It's like the subconscious of the planet, cold, dark, and full of unfinished stories. And maybe that's the real hidden history. Not aliens or lost empires, but our own need to fill silence with meaning. Every rumor, every blurred satellite image, every forbidden theory says more about us than about the continent itself. We want there to be something under the ice because emptiness feels unbearable. But even emptiness has its own kind of beauty. Antarctica is the Earth's pause button where time freezes, noise stops, and all that remains is wind, snow, and memory. So, here we are, floating above Antarctica in our imagination. Just endless white, broken only by the faint ridges of mountains sleeping beneath. Every sound gets swallowed by the snow. It's the kind of silence that makes you start hearing your own thoughts echo back at you. But even the quietest places tell stories, if you know how to listen. In Antarctica's case, the storytellers are scientists with very expensive drills. They pull up ice cores that stretch back nearly 1,000,000 years. Every millimeter is a layer of time, frozen air, ancient dust, tiny chemical fingerprints of the planet's moods. From those frozen pages, we've learned that Earth breathes in long, slow cycles. Warm periods, cold periods, everything repeating like clockwork. And we, sitting here with our space heaters and smartphones, are just the latest blip in that rhythm. Sometimes, buried in those layers, researchers find something strange, a sudden spike in volcanic ash, or traces of metals that shouldn't be there. Each one sparks a question. Was it a meteor impact, a super volcano, or just another reminder that the Earth has always been a bit dramatic? The sleeping forests Antarctica wasn't always this pale. Millions of years ago, it was green. We know because scientists have found fossilized forests under the ice. Petrified trunks, leaves, even spores. Evidence of a time when the continent was warm, wet, and full of life. You can still walk through valleys where tree stumps lie exactly where they fell. Only now they restone, frozen in position, like nature's own art installation. It's a strange thought. The same land that now kills almost everything that touches it once held dragonflies the size of your hand and mossy riverbanks where dinosaurs walked. Then the world shifted. Continents drifted, climates changed, and Antarctica drifted into eternal sleep. Sometimes I like to think of the ice as a blanket, not just covering, but preserving. A pause button on a world that's long gone, waiting for someone to come and ask the right questions. The microbes that wait, and beneath that blanket, life still flickers. In 2020, scientists drilled into a subglacial lake and found living microorganisms, bacteria, that had been sealed off for thousands of years. No sunlight, no fresh nutrients, just persistence. They feed on minerals and trace chemicals from the rocks below. Some survive on hydrogen. It's not glamorous, but it's survival at its most stubborn. When they brought samples to the surface, it was like opening a time capsule, a window into an ancient ecosystem that never got the memo about evolution. If life can exist there, under pressure, in total darkness, maybe it can exist anywhere. Mars, Europa, some other frozen moon. Antarctica becomes a rehearsal space for alien biology, just with more penguins. The melting edge. But now the ice is melting. Not in a tomorrow we drown kind of way, but enough that scientists are watching nervously. Rising temperatures are revealing things that haven't seen sunlight in millions of years. Old rocks, bones, and occasionally, forgotten human relics from early expeditions. In 2017, a research team found fossilized remains of ancient marine life in rock layers exposed by retreating glaciers. It's like the planet slowly revealing its scrapbook, one soggy page at a time. The irony is that our climate crisis, the same one causing so much anxiety, is also unsealing secrets we never otherwise discover. The Earth, apparently, has chosen the dramatic way to share its history. And yes, part of that history could reshape what we think we know. If Antarctica's ice keeps melting, we'll learn more about how continents move, how species adapt, and maybe how civilizations might have risen and fallen in cycles longer than we've ever recorded. The future beneath the ice. There's a strange comfort in knowing that Antarctica doesn't care what we believe. It doesn't matter if you think there are alien bases, ancient pyramids, or just a few bored penguins guarding the void. The continent remains cold, slow, patient. While we debate, it keeps recording. Every snowflake that lands becomes another line in its frozen diary. And maybe that's the quiet lesson here. Not everything hidden is a conspiracy. Sometimes it's just time, layered deep enough that we mistake patience for mystery. So tonight, as you drift off, imagine that great white continent breathing under the stars, unbothered, unrushed, holding the memory of everything that came before, and everything that will come after.